Good morning, Facebook. Today is day 19 of my mental health awareness challenge. It's very exciting that we now have 6 more videos to go. So I'm now on letter P, and P is a letter I'm going to settle on a bit because there are few things to consider on letter P. So I'm starting today with personality, and that's it's a word we use very frequently, and we don't really consider the impact of how that affects our mental health. And also, it's a word we use frequently without really giving a thought to. So I'm going to be talking this morning on personality and mental health. So to start with, what is personality? Personality is a collection of our character and attributes that we gather over time during our period of development. Usually it starts from childhood. And what we do know is that by the time we get to our late teens or our early 20s, our personality have been more or less formed. And thinking about personality, it's simply the way that we think, that we feel, and that we behave. Is a characteristic way in which we think, and that we feel, and that we behave. And that exactly is what makes us an individual. You see, people say that, and that's the reality, there are over 7 billion people on the surface of the earth, and every one person is unique. And in this regard, I feel that I can speak from a point of experience because, as some of you know, I'm a strikingly identical twin. And despite the fact that my twin brother and myself look so strikingly identical in terms of the way we talk, in terms of our voices, in terms of our looks, even though we are obviously in our middle age, the reality is that we still have different personalities, and there are things that can tell us apart even in the way we behave. So that's just to let you know that every single person on earth has an individual personality. It's like your unique selling point in life. And your personality is actually the lens through which you see the world. It's the lens through which you see yourself, and it is the lens which you see others, and also the lens through which you see humanity. So that's what makes you, more or less. It's what makes you an individual. Now, like I said, a great deal of personality is developed during childhood. That's when we learn to deal with stress, we learn to deal with the world, and the way our personality develops has a lot to do with the relationships that we have with our main caregivers during our early childhood. So basically, usually, for most people, your main caregiver would have been your mother and your father, or predominantly your mother. But some people have different caregivers as a result of different circumstances. And what we do know is that if there is an unhealthy relationship with the primary caregiver, the primary caregiver is the most important person who delivers care, the most prominent or stable person in your life as a child. If there is an unhealthy relationship with that person, if, for instance, there is abuse, emotional, physical, or sexual abuse, or there is adversity of any form, then that could impact negatively on the way that the personality develops. And we do know that there is a term in psychiatry that is called personality disorder. I want to say today that that's not a disorder, that's not a term or a phrase that should be used in a derogatory way or in a stigmatizing way, because indeed there are people who suffer from a personality difficulty, and we should actually see that as a disorder. It's like an illness. If somebody suddenly gets diagnosed with diabetes, we don't stigmatize them. We don't say that it's their fault that they develop diabetes, because in reality, people who suffer from a personality disorder, it's not their fault. They've just found themselves in circumstances. They've grown up saying that they react to the world different from the way that other people do. And I'm going to come to the definition of personality disorder soon. So basically, what I'm saying this morning is that people who have a personality disorder, they require our compassion, they require our empathy, they require our support. Because really, it's not that they're behaving badly. It's not that they've chosen to behave like that. It's just because their experiences in early life has shaped their outlook towards themselves, towards others, and towards the world, and it has impacted negatively on those relationships. So we do know that up to 1 in 10 or up to 1 in 20 people have what is called a personality disorder. So what is a personality disorder? A personality disorder is an impairment of personality that tends to play out in relationships, in social life, in relationships, in social life, in work, and just across board in all the spheres of the person's life. They tend to react to life differently from we would, and the way they react to life, the way they react in their relationships is such that it creates problems. So there are usually people who have difficulty getting along with themselves. That would be interesting, but they have relationship even getting along with themselves, getting along with others, and getting along with the world as a whole. And like I said, that usually cuts across board. And we also know that people who have a personality disorder, that usually starts from very early on. By their teenage years, those things will become apparent, and by the time they become adults, the signs and symptoms will be there. So what are the signs and symptoms to look out for? Usually there are people who have difficulty forming relationships. Relationships is usually a very, very key thing. Maybe you know a work colleague or a brother or a sister or somebody in your life or in your church or in your community who finds it difficult to form relationships. They find it difficult. They're always falling out with people. They can be suspicious. They can always feel that people don't like them. They might not even like themselves as well. They might find that they suffer from mood swings. Their moods could switch from one extreme to the other very quickly. They might complain of feeling empty all the time. Even when they're in a large company of people, they still feel lonely. They might also have difficulty managing their moods in terms of they can be very impulsive. They can do things very impulsively. For instance, they get angry very easily, and they will say they've lost the plot to the point in which they can do things that they later regret. They might turn to the use of unhealthy coping skills like using alcohol or substances to try and manage their mood or manage their symptoms. They might also resort to turning the harm on themselves by self-cutting, doing dangerous things like putting themselves in harm's way. They might involve in indiscriminate sexual activities. They might involve in just harming themselves in various ways in order to try and make them feel better. Some people even use self-harm to try and manage their emotions. So now, in terms of personality disorder is a video series on its own, and I'm not attempting to cover everything today. But just to say that there are three main groups of personality disorders that have been, three main clusters of personality disorder that have been identified. So there's the first cluster, which is the cluster of people who are odd and eccentric. So that includes people who have a paranoid personality, people who have what's called a schizoid personality. They are a bit odd. They can be eccentric in their way that they look at life. And there are also people who have a schizotypal personality. That's people who it's like their beliefs are almost bordering on paranormal. They might even say that they might even experience things such as hearing voices, seeing things that are not there. And sometimes those types of personality develop into schizophrenia. So, but like I said, personality disorder is a series that I'm going to run in the future. That's something that I'm really going to run a full series on because it requires several videos. It's not just one single video that is going to sort that out. So that's the odd and eccentric cluster, which we call the cluster A, personality disorders. There's also the cluster B, which is the cluster of the dramatic and the erratic. the dramatic and the erratic are people, like I said earlier, who suffer from mood swings, who find difficulty in managing their emotions, and they have difficulty in forming relationships. They might also have difficulty in expressing empathy and being and feeling remorse when they've done wrong. So they might be involved in criminal activities. That's also a group. That group of dramatic and erratic include things like borderline personality and or a split personality. That's the common one that people talk about commonly, a borderline or emotionally unstable personality. They're all the same term. Like I said again, I'm going to address all this. This is just really a quick whistle stop video on personality and mental health. So the cluster B, the dramatic and erratic, includes borderline personality. It's a personality. It also includes dissocial personality. It includes histrionic personality. Usually, this group of erratic and dramatic also includes narcissistic personality. This group are the ones that people sometimes refer to. Some members of this group or some members of this cluster could actually meet criteria of what is called psychopathy. So, but like I said, that's story for another day. I'm just touching on these things today. And the third group, the third cluster, is the anxious and fearful. The anxious and fearful cluster. And these are the people that belong to this group are people who have an anarchistic personality. Yesterday, I spoke about obsessive compulsive disorder. People who have an anarchistic personality have a personality that almost typifies OCDs. So they can be obsessional about things. They can be inflexible sometimes. And so, but it's not just an illness for them. It's a pervasive thing. It's not something that comes and goes. It's always there for them. And so that's an anarchistic personality. And then, of course, people who are dependent personality are people who feel so. It's almost like they're unsure about everything. They are very easily suggestible. They depend on others for the basic things that yourself and myself will very easily get on with and do. It's almost like they're dependent emotionally and personality-wise. They're dependent. So those are and of course there are people who also have an anxious personality trait. So it's not just an anxiety disorder. They have a predisposition to be anxious all through their life. They are more likely to feel to be perturbed or to be worried about things that yourself and myself would usually take for granted. So that's just a whistle stop tour of personality and mental health. The other thing I want to say is that in terms of personality, we do know that as people develop, as people grow older, the good news is that personality tends to improve. The difficulties that people experience with personality tend to become less, because people get to understand themselves more and they can actually manage those situations. But there are people who still find their personality is problematic. What I would like to say is that if you find that you find it difficult to get along with people, and that when you look at yourself compared with others, it looks like there is some problem, and maybe some people who are bold enough in your life or who feel they've got that gravitas with you have told you that your personality is a bit problematic, I encourage you to seek help. The first thing to do will be to speak to your GP. And sometimes I want to emphasize that psychological therapies, there are very rare forms of psychological therapies that are available to people who have a personality difficulty. But the place to start would be to speak to your GP first. I want to reassure you as well. People worry about the fact that, am I going to get a therapist or somebody who is going to understand my religious background, is going to understand my culture? In this day and age, that's no longer a valid reason not to seek help, because there are actually services out there, or therapists out there, or private practitioners out there who have an understanding of religious backgrounds, have an understanding of cultural backgrounds, and who in fact have a first-hand experience of being members of those communities. So in that regard, they're able to give a service that is actually tailored to your need. So if, for instance, you feel that you're a Christian and because of that might prevent you from going for therapy, I don't think that should be a reason, because there are people who are Christian therapists out there. And that cuts across all the religious organizations or religious views as well. I do hope that this video has been very helpful. I'm hoping that it will at least help you to raise some questions about your personality and to have a closer look. And perhaps you've been suffering in silence, to let you know that there is help out there. Once again, a call out to my very dear friend, or a shout out to my dear friend, Reverend Victoria Lawrence. Thank you for this nomination. It's really been an eye-opener for me. And I'm also looking forward to recording the remaining videos. Tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about post-traumatic stress disorder. So thank you for listening and have a great day.